in our state. And he is 2 for 2 in the last 2 Iowa caucuses. He was with Mike Huckabee before I was in '08, before Mike Huckabee was cool. And the day before he endorsed Rick Santorum in 2012, I believe Rick was at 4%. And that was about a month before the caucuses. Was it 2%?
2 weeks.
Oh, it was 2 weeks. All right.
2 weeks of a day.
2 weeks before the caucuses. And Rick set at 4% in the Real Clear Politics Iowa caucus polling average, and then ended up winning those caucuses 2 weeks later. So it's neither one of us believe either in either one of our positions. We are like shaman that speak from on high, and then herds of sheeple like cattle just respond to our Pied Piper like cattle call or dog whistle. But I think that the people that listen to our shows or belong to our organizations here in the First in the Nation caucus state, I do think we've built enough credibility with them that they know, hey, this is what we're thinking, that it might influence the way that they might look at something before they make a decision. And I think that's clearly the role that Bob, you guys played for Rick Santorum in 2012. And so I wanted to bring you in here to tell this audience a little bit about something you and I are doing that's called Lead or Get Out of the Way, which is really designed to do two things, to cure two ills we've heard the last couple of GOP presidential primary cycles. Number one, it's to bring the rest of the country from, especially because it's a lot of these red states that where a lot of conservatives are that really aren't heard from until half the field has been already removed.
Way too late.
Yeah, we want to bring those people from those red states because we want more conservative participation in this process, obviously. So we want to bring the rest of the country into what's going on in Iowa, but also we have seen conservatives splinter and fracture in the last two cycles, which has allowed a very weak establishment candidate to win a plurality of votes and then lose a general election because he can't fire up his own base. And we want to see if it's possible this time if we bring the rest of the nation in, because we know this, if we have one clear alternative to the establishment, we're going to beat that guy almost every single time. The last couple of primary cycles have demonstrated that. And so that's really two of the key goals that we have with this.
It really is. And first of all, going back to Governor Huckabee and our enrollment, yours and mine, and then to Senator Santorum in 2012, Steve, I really think what we did in those days is we gave voice to what other people were feeling. You know, they were probably feeling it all along. And all of a sudden, when we give voice to what they're feeling, then they moved.
Sure, you might have liked Rick Santorum, but you're thinking, guys, at 4%, even though that's what my gut is telling me, is that really what my head wants to do? And if somebody on respect comes along and says, let's go there, then you're like, okay, cool.
But at the end of the day, what you said, the candidate needs to close the sale. Rick Santorum had to do all the legwork. He had to do all the hard work. He had to do all the speeches. He had to do all the debates, those type of things, to get people in that position to say, when somebody does give me voice to what they're feeling, they can move that way. Or Governor Mike Huckabee, the same way. But as you said, with Lead or Get Out of the Way, what we're doing with this initiative, and your listeners here can learn more at leadorgetoutoftheway.com, is we're going to invite the whole country into this process. Because it's time that conservatives stick together. And it's time that we conservatives show these politicians that the numbers are on our side. Numbers matter in this deal. But we want full spectrum, true conservatives, all the way from the sanctity of human life, God's design for the family, one man, one woman marriage, the Constitution and liberty, religious liberty, and anything that benefits the family we're for, and that takes away from the family we're against. But we want candidates that actually get this. We're not here about being a kingmaker. This isn't about any personality. This is about being a standard bearer, what God says our candidates and what our office holders should be like.
And I think one of the things you and I have noticed is the vetting process on these sorts of faith, freedom, and family issues. It can be difficult to pin these guys down because they can give multiple answers to different audiences. They can kind of hide behind procedural votes and the like. And then they can just come into a lot of these states with major media markets and just blitzkrieg them with television ads. And then you find out later on, hey, this is not what I paid for. We've learned that lesson. What is so unique about how we're able, because it's been hard to hold them to as tough of a line as, say, the pro-Second Amendment groups do. There's never any deviation on their issue because they punish people automatically. If the NRA, Larry Pratt, at Gun Owners of America, you deviate from their script, man, they spank you publicly if you do that. And it's hard. It's a little bit harder to narrow them down on these kinds of issues because there's so many other things that are at stake than it's just as simple as an issue involving whether you get to keep your gun or not. And so where we think we have an advantage here in our state is there's not a major media market here. We don't have a top 50 television market. We have one top 100 radio market. So you cannot come into, even in New Hampshire, you get the Boston TV market there, you can drop $10 million and buy the New Hampshire primary. You can't do that in Iowa. You have to campaign. You have to let people see you face to face. You have to let them test your sincerity. Iowans in either party will not vote for you if you do not engage them that way. Hillary Clinton learned that against Barack Obama in 2008. Mitt Romney learned that against Mike Huckabee in 2008. And he learned it again against Rick Santorum last year. You have to engage them on an individual level and let them size you up at coffee shops, diners, and those sorts of things. And that gives us a level of access to get questions and a vetting process to these guys that they probably don't have to experience anywhere else.
You know, and through this radio program and through this Leader Get Out of the Way initiative, what we're trying to translate is when we get to see the whites of their eyes when they're communicating with us on these issues, we get to determine very quickly, are they just check marking the box and then moving on? Or do they really mean it? Does it match up with their previous record? Does it match up with their other speeches? And in Iowa, we have that opportunity. So we vet these candidates fully. If you don't believe us, ask any candidate that's ever spent time here in Iowa. They'll say they vet us fully. But the two candidates, the one in 08 with Governor Mike Huckabee and the one in 12, Senator Rick Santorum, those guys got pushed all the time by the national media on life, on marriage, on religious liberty. And the reason is the national media picked up on it as well, is that these guys really believe this stuff.
I mean, remember the debate where Megyn Kelly from Fox News said it was after the Iowa straw poll, or before the Iowa straw poll. And after the debate, she said on Fox News, I've never been to a presidential debate where candidates had to answer questions about how much power judges should have. Well, that's a direct reflection of work guys like you and I did with grassroots conservatives in our state in the election prior, firing those 3 Supreme Court justices who thought they could redefine marriage. And of course, that had all the education we had to do of the voting populace to get that result. Well, those people then turn around and said, hey, I'm not going to get scammed anymore. I'm going to ask all these guys these kinds of questions. Are you just going to sit there and give me everything I want to hear and then surrender the first time the judges tell you you can't do that? And they had to answer questions on those kinds of issues they had to answer probably never in their entire political careers up until that point.
And what you and I understand, I think what the listening audience here understands of Brian Fisher's, because Brian and I have been on this radio program.
And AFR was a big part of that effort.
They were a huge part of that effort. Is that the way the left is advancing their agenda is through a very liberal and activist court. Well, what happens in Iowa, since we took 3 of those justices out and we educated the populace that courts don't get to make law, that's up to the legislature, and they don't get to execute law, that's up to the governor. Those people then took that conversation to the presidential candidates. What say you? And so now you have a U.S. Supreme Court that rules on DOMA, that rules on Proposition 8, and we're seeing the courts again taking way too much power. The court in New Jersey that Governor Christie is really upset about.
But not willing to do anything about.
But not willing to challenge that court for its unconstitutional measures as it forces same-sex marriage on the state of New Jersey. That's what we get to do here in the state of Iowa, and we want to involve the entire listening audience across the country in this process.
In this last election cycle, just a couple of examples. In the last caucus cycle, your organization put out a marriage pledge that literally was ripped right from the Bible, unlike probably anything these candidates have ever had to sign before. And you narrowed it down to 2 pretty quick because only 2 were willing to sign it, Michelle Bachmann and Rick Santorum. But who ended up winning the caucuses? And who won the straw poll? The first person that signed your pledge was Michelle Bachmann. She won the straw poll. The second person that signed it, Rick Santorum, he won the caucuses. I worked with Personhood USA to put together probably the toughest pro-life pledge. These guys, with no exceptions, nothing allowed, no wiggle room. I mean, you know, I edited that thing down to the syllable. All right, every scam potential answer I thought they could give, I took it all out. Man, it was so bad we made Ron Paul, when he turned his in, had to write a 7-paragraph clarification on the back page because it was so tight. There was no worming out of this, okay? And we took it to the candidates, and we got Rick Perry to sign it. Rick Perry changed his position on rape and incest exceptions through this process.
Yes, he did.
Newt Gingrich did the same thing. Rick Santorum, Michelle Bachmann, and then ultimately Ron Paul signed it as well. And those are examples of how we are able to use the access and leverage we have here in the First in the Nation caucus state to get these guys to move on issues that in the past they haven't been willing to move on, and the party and their consultants are telling them they should just abandon anyway.
And what happened is, you're right, Michelle Bachmann signed it, Rick Santorum signed it, but after they signed it and they saw where the grassroots started to move, then Rick Perry signed it.
Mm-hmm.
Herman Cain supported it with his own letter. Newt Gingrich, same thing. Tim Pawlenty, the same thing. And that left Mitt Romney out there as the outlier of saying, I don't know where I really stand on this stuff, but we're going to force them on these issues. We want a full spectrum conservative that understands the biblical and constitutional foundation of public policy.
Now, if you want to learn more about this effort, we're going to give you a website. Leadorgetoutoftheway.com is the website, where we want to bring you all, especially if you're a listener here on AFR. You're the exact person we are. You are the exact wacko bird, bitterly clinging to your guns and your Bibles that we are looking for. We want to bring you to Iowa, take advantage of the access and the platform we have in this process to move the slate of candidates as far to the right as we possibly can. But to do that, we have to show them that there's numbers. Why did they move to the right on your marriage pledge and my pro-life pledge? Because they saw that's where the numbers were. And so if you want to take part in that effort, if you want to help us to leverage those numbers, that's what the left does. You know, the ACLU shows up in a congressman's office and says, hey, we got 10,000 members in your district if you don't support this secular bill, and we're going to tell all of them not to vote for you. That's how they leverage people. And the good guys do it too. That's how the pro-Second Amendment people do it. They're like, hey, man, we'll take you out. And we got the numbers to do it. So if you want to help us with this, you want to learn more about it, go to the website, leadorgetoutoftheway.com. That's leadorgetoutoftheway.com. Now, when we come back, we've already done one vetting process through Lead or Get Out of the Way on the key issue of religious liberty, which is threatened now more than ever before in American history. And we're going to share with you the responses, or in some cases, the lack thereof, that we got with a whole slew of potential 2016 GOP presidential candidates. We'll do that with you here next.